The world is my idea. This is a truth which holds good for everything that lives and knows, though man alone can bring it into reflective and abstract consciousness. This is how Arthur Schopenhauer introduces us to his most celebrated work, The World as Will and Representation. Such a potent way to introduce your audience to your inner world requires quite some audacity, and Schopenhauer showcased a considerate amount of it throughout his life. He was the philosopher that preceded Nietzsche and succeeded Kant. These three philosophy moguls created a continuum of critical thinking and life-defining concepts that influenced the Western thought like few. Schopenhauer was a man of great depth who tried to understand the maladies of the human condition and propose pragmatic ways to deal with it. Through his writings, I discovered notions that not only re-engineer the ways we think about ourselves and our relationship with reality, but also transcend the way we view the very fabric of reality. Schopenhauer's work was dense and his language assertive. He was a pessimist, but also a pragmatist. He detested simplistic arguments and wanted to get the gist of things. Most of his ideas emerged from a strong desire to live a life that was within his scope of understanding, but also face the truth about reality, regardless of how harsh this may be. The main concept developed by Schopenhauer is that of the will to live. The will to live, Wille zum Leben, as Schopenhauer calls it, is the expression of the desire of all nature to pursue and propagate life. Without will, there can be no life, but it is also through will that most of mankind's misery and suffering is manifested. We as humans are consumed by our drives such as sexual desires, pursuit of pleasure, need for interaction, will to power, the appreciation of aesthetics, and much more. They are all integral constituents of the way we operate, and they all fall under the umbrella of the will to live. Life isn't just an abstract concept for us. It is an experience manifested through a plethora of wills that are intertwined in an attempt to form an ensemble that justifies the reasoning behind our existence. But this multiplicity of individual wills isn't limited solely to the human dimension. It can be found in the whole of nature in ways we cannot comprehend due to our limited perception. This is what Schopenhauer calls the will with capital W. And this limited perception, according to Schopenhauer, is the source of our misery and suffering. The world is apprehensible only through examination and introspection and through the transcendence of egoism that each human is endowed with. Ego is the enemy, an enemy that can be confronted only through self-awareness, empathy, and knowledge. The curse that has befallen our species is that we cannot really free ourselves from the will. The will can be released or negated, but it can't change. Within this landscape, we ought to attempt to operate in the most effective way possible. It sounds like an arduous challenge. It feels like groping and fumbling in the dark. But Schopenhauer believes that the denial of the will to live might be the only way to salvation from suffering. This pessimistic outlook towards life is observed all over his narrative, and it was because of this tone that many refer to him as the philosopher of pessimism. The absurdity of reality has always been the main area of interest for most Western philosophers. Schopenhauer, in his attempt to create meaning out of this absurdity, adopted a very pessimistic rhetoric. Take for example the following passage from The World as Will and Representation. And to this world, to this scene of tormented and agonized beings who only continue to exist by devouring each other, in which therefore every ravenous beast is the living grave of thousands of others, and its self-maintenance is a chain of painful deaths, and in which the capacity for feeling pain increases with knowledge and therefore reaches its highest degree in man. A degree which is the higher, the more intelligent the man is. To this world it has been sought to apply the system of optimism and demonstrate to us that it is the best of all possible worlds. The absurdity is glaring. It is self-evident that his inner world is tormented due to the absurdity that is prevalent all over our existence. However, he doesn't give up. He understands that there is an escape, even if this can be found on a metaphysical level. Not merely that the world exists, but still more that it is such a miserable and melancholy world is the tormenting problem of metaphysics. Here he's mentioning the world of metaphysics by realizing that there needs to be another dimension to our existence, one we will never experience if we keep recycling the same thinking motifs. The life of every individual viewed as a whole and in general, and when only its most significant features are emphasized, is really a tragedy, but gone through in detail, it has the character of a comedy. Sarcasm is also a weapon he uses from time to time in order to alleviate the significance of the tragedy of the human condition. Through self-awareness, we come to understand that our Creator has either a very sadistic taste or that he, she, it, or they are testing us. When we realize how tragic that is, we end up thinking that it could all be a travesty of some sort. Having to deal with this level of absurdity makes you either angry or you laugh at it. For if anything in the world is desirable, so desirable that even the dull and uneducated herd in its more reflective moments would value it more than silver and gold, it is that a ray of light should fall on the obscurity of our existence and that we should obtain some information about this enigmatical life of ours in which nothing is clear except its misery and vanity. Eventually he ends up adopting a more pragmatic stance. Lamenting can only get one so far, and after we get over our anger, we need to face the truth and deal with it. Schopenhauer emphasizes that in the face of a world filled with endless strife, our only escape is a universal moral awareness that will allow us to achieve a more balanced frame of mind. By merging Christian ideas and Indian wisdom, he attempts to lay out some major principles of moral awareness that can lead humanity to a more balanced state. Principles such as the repudiation of violence altogether, the idea that one should treat others as one treats oneself, the transcendence of egoism, the fight against suffering in the world, and the perennial cultivation of compassion as an absolute humanitarian doctrine. After tasting the truth of human nature from a moral standpoint, Schopenhauer realizes that there are only two paths that can help one deal with this conundrum: aesthetics and asceticism. Aesthetics is presented as the antidote to the ugliness of suffering. It is through aesthetic perception that the transcendence of ego can manifest itself, for with aesthetics we can evaluate an idea beyond our earthly interpretation of reality. Orienting consciousness towards states of mind that are less individuated and more cosmic has always inspired great thinkers, hence the strong affinity towards Eastern philosophies. Only through the pure contemplation, which becomes absorbed entirely in the object, are the ideas comprehended. And the nature of genius consists precisely in the preeminent ability for such contemplation. This demands a complete forgetting of our own person. We can temporarily emancipate ourselves from what the will dictates through an aesthetic experience. On the occurrence of an aesthetic appreciation, the will thereby vanishes entirely from consciousness. Asceticism, on the other hand, arises as the more secure attitude, since, according to Schopenhauer, aesthetic perception, due to its transient nature, is most of the time short-lived. Asceticism can result in the denial towards our will to live, thus allowing us to fight against the suffering that the will attempts to impose upon us. By the expression asceticism, which I have already used so often, I understand in the narrower sense this deliberate breaking of the will by refusing the agreeable and looking for the disagreeable. The voluntarily chosen way of life of penance and self-chastisement for the constant mortification of the will. The issue usually highlighted as a contradiction in this way of thinking is that the suffering that asceticism tries to assuage paradoxically leads to different types of suffering like isolation, anxiety, antisocial behavior, sexual oppression, and so on. Regardless of how asceticism is portrayed or exercised, Schopenhauer truly believes that the ascetic struggle is the ultimate struggle against the will, and this act in itself can give us a modicum of what self-transcendence might actually feel like. Many prominent philosophical figures criticized Schopenhauer's work and claimed that there are numerous contradictions in his philosophy. This is inevitable when one possesses such a genius in the art of abstract reasoning. The world is full of contradictions, and we should all just embrace the reality of this. Schopenhauer, with his works, has rightfully earned a place in the pantheon of philosophers across space and time. In my first introduction to him, he made me a pessimist, but then he helped me enjoy life. His words can be mesmerizing and can alleviate the pain of existence for most of us, insofar as we open our hearts and our minds to them.